Okay.
All right. Okay. So for those of you who don't know Dr. Tim Jackson, he has been with us before. He is a master of so many topics. My favorite three that, I've been on my front end are the methylation, mold, and mitochondria. And I almost feel like we can't talk about one without like tapping into some of the other ones, right? They all have
Right.
like they interplay with each other. They have a relationship with each other. But Dr. Tim is my go-to person for anything that I need to know that I want to take it above and beyond and so much further. I'm not going to go into all the bio stuff. I don't have my intro pulled up for that. And I'm going to tie this into all of our other videos we've done. So people pretty much are getting to know who you are anyway, because you're being talked about in all of my groups. So I just appreciate that you're here. And I really want you to touch on, why do we need to know about mitochondria? Why is it important for health coaches and for us, for our own health, to know what it is? So let's start with you telling us, what is the mitochondria?
So the mitochondria are one of the organelles in your cell. You kind of described it as a worm. It's a little more circular than that. And it originally, one of the theories is that it was a bacteria that our cells kind of envelop. And that's one of the reasons that you'll see a lot of times people say that, you have to protect the mitochondria or they can get damaged if you're taking antibiotics. And that's why some of the, fluoroquinolone antibiotics are so dangerous. But the mitochondria traditionally, they're described as the battery of the cell. So they're making ATP. And a lot of people, they think, oh, energy, like work, I need energy to work out. But reality is you need energy for every thought that goes through your mind, every muscular contraction that happens, every beat of your heart. And so depending on the tissue or the organ, you'll have different numbers of mitochondria per cell. The organ systems that have the most are the brain and spinal cord, the liver, and the heart. So, if we try to connect the dots between every disease or syndrome, disorder known to man, the common denominator is mitochondrial dysfunction. And so, like I said, originally, and even now people will say, they just produce energy, but they do a lot more than that. They sense and detect, what's going on in their local environment in terms of inflammation, oxidative stress, pH, things of that nature. And so, they're important for so many functions in the body. And when they start to decline, every function in your body starts to decline.
Okay. So let's just say where do you really start with this then? I mean, when we say, when we try to come at our clients and we try to help them figure out what's going on with their health, right? We may say, we start with I like my 6 foundations as a checklist because, having someone remove gluten from their food is a lot simpler to explain than what's going on with their mitochondria, right? So,
right.
But when do you bring in the health of the mitochondria as far as testing and trying to figure out if that's what's causing what's going on with people? How does that play a part? How does that fit into the big picture?
Well, really everything you're doing, I mean, I might not tell people, that we're working on their mitochondria, but we're ultimately, pretty much all the time working on some form of the mitochondria. So, if we're trying to calm down inflammation, that's helping to improve the function of the mitochondria. If we're trying to balance blood sugar, that's improving the function of the mitochondria. If we're trying to get rid of pathogenic bugs in the gut, that's helping the mitochondria because it indirectly or directly sometimes causes inflammation. And so, you can have the conversation about, we're going to work directly on your mitochondria, but really everything, for example, thyroid hormone boosting T3 levels will improve mitochondrial function. So a lot of times, you don't necessarily think of what you're doing as being beneficial to the mitochondria, but it can definitely help for sure. And if you want to do direct testing, there's a few tests you can do. Organic acid test sometimes will give you an indicator of mitochondrial function. There's some tests out of a few European labs that will better measure, mitochondrial function. but, the best way is really, if you have symptoms in multiple systems of the body, there's definitely a mitochondrial component. And so, things that damage the mitochondria are anything from pathogens that create an inflammatory cascade and inflammation, to environmental chemicals, to pesticides, glyphosate or Roundup. They can all damage the mitochondria, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So let me ask you this then, when we say damage the mitochondria, what does that look like? Like, give us a visual of what happens when put a healthy mitochondria up next to a diseased or damaged mitochondria in our minds here. What does the damaged mitochondria look like? And is it reparable? Can you fix it once it's been damaged? How long does it take? That kind of thing.
Well, damaged mitochondria, they're going to have unhealthy membranes, much like if you have unhealthy cell membranes, eventually down the line, it's going to lead to unhealthy mitochondrial membranes. And the mitochondria actually has two membranes, an inner mitochondrial membrane and an outer mitochondrial membrane. And your listeners have probably heard of things like L-carnitine. Well, that's where L-carnitine shuttles the fatty acids to get burned. So a damaged mitochondria will have holes kind of poked in the membrane, and it won't be able to generate the ATP, the energy that it should. Other things that can happen, if it's really damaged, the shape can sort of change. It, like I said, has holes in the cell membrane, and you can have damage to these complexes in the electron transport chain. There's 5 complexes, and they can start to dysfunction. So, it's nothing, something you'd have to really look at the microscopic level or submicroscopic level to see. But as far as repairing them, it's a matter of removing what's damaging them in the first place, making sure you have plenty of antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, because the mitochondria are very susceptible to oxidative stress. And, so you have to build up your antioxidant stores. You have to remove the inflammatory stressors, and then you have to repair the mitochondrial membranes. Okay,
so let's talk a little bit about how, and I see your questions going on in the chat, and I will definitely address those, you guys, in a minute, but let's talk a little bit about how, typically when people are talking about repairing the gut, right, as an example, they'll say remove, repair, replace. So with the mitochondria, when you take away what's damaging the mitochondria, right, you have to take that away first before you try to start improving the health of the mitochondria, or can you remove the pathogen, remove the problem, and start to repair and heal while you're doing that?
No, I mean, you can start to, heal the mitochondria before, you take away, because it's never going to be just one thing that's damaging the mitochondria. You're going to have multiple things, from environmental chemicals, and you call it, when the mitochondria are damaged, it's called a mitochondropathy. So it can be caused from viruses or other pathogens. It can be caused from certain chemicals like glyphosate or Roundup can damage the mitochondria. Heavy metals can damage the mitochondria. So it's a process. So, you don't want to wait until you've gotten all the things out, that are potentially going to damage the mitochondria. You want to give it some protection with antioxidants like glutathione and superoxide dismutase first. That's what I do. And, it's a long process. You never really, in my opinion, I've been doing detoxing for 15 years, and you're never going to get everything out that damages the mitochondria, just because, babies that are born, young babies, they have a huge dumping of toxins from their mother that they have to deal with. And then they have to deal with the everyday toxins that they're exposed to. And so, the best you can do is to optimize your detox pathways, optimize gut health and thyroid health, do things like rebounding and using a sauna. All those things, are important. You can also start rebuilding the mitochondrial membrane at the same time, but long term, you just want to keep in mind, the more I can do to remove these chemicals, which you need to remove for other reasons, even if they didn't damage the mitochondria, then, that's the long-term goal.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Can the mitochondria die completely?
Yes, they can.
Scary.
Well, no, it's not, because you don't want a cell to divide with a really unhealthy mitochondria. And so you can get cell death or cell suicide. It's called apoptosis.
Mm-hmm.
And the cells start to sense when they're extremely unhealthy. And so that's actually a good thing. It's a protective mechanism that we have. And who knows where the threshold lies. It may differ from tissue to tissue, but you certainly can. But you can also build new mitochondria.
Okay.
And that's where supplements like PQQ come in.
What is PQQ?
It's helps with mitochondrial biogenesis, so it builds new mitochondria.
I'm writing this in here, so yeah.
Yeah, don't ask me to pronounce it. It's pyridoxaquinolone, whatever.
Okay.
But that supplement and a few other nutrients can help with mitochondrial biogenesis. Things like fasting can help. Those are your best bet.
How does fasting help? Just allowing the body to start to do a repair process because we're getting out of the way with not eating or putting.
Well, fasting kind of resets the body as a whole, because you reset your immune system, because when you're eating constantly, especially if you're eating 5 or 6 small meals a day, your body is constantly exposed to antigens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you reset your immune system. You get an increase in growth hormone output, improvement in thyroid hormone output, assuming your adrenals aren't too stressed. So you get sort of like a refreshing, a reset button on your metabolism, so to speak.
Okay.
Now you have to be careful with fasting, because if your blood sugar is unstable, that's not a good thing, and it's also damaging to the mitochondria.
Okay, so let's go back up for just a second where you were just talking about regeneration or whatever. How does a person feel beyond the average symptoms, like, oh, I'm tired or fatigued? What other things could really say to you are in a really bad state with your mitochondria, besides like the obvious fatigue and things like that? How would you know?
The more symptoms you have in the more systems, the more damage you've had to the mitochondria. So remember, when we first got on, I was talking about how the number of mitochondria vary per cell from one tissue system or organ system to another. Typically, the first organ system that it shows up in is the central nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord. And so brain fog. Now, brain fog can be caused by a million things,
right?
But neurological dysfunction, brain fog, those sorts of things are typically where it first shows up. The next place it may show up is cardiovascular dysfunction. So your heart should pump out 5 liters of blood per minute. And I mean, this just tells you how serious the mitochondria are. If they get damaged enough, you don't get enough blood pumping per minute, and then you're not getting enough nutrients and oxygen to your tissues.
Mm-hmm.
And so that becomes serious. But really, especially neurological disorders like MS, Parkinson's, that's why Dr. Terry Walls talks about the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
She had MS, and that's a classic mitochondrial issue. But then again, diabetes is a mitochondrial issue, ultimately. So really, pretty much any disorder or syndrome you have is going to have a certain degree of mitochondrial dysfunction. And when you start repairing the mitochondria, it's not like, okay, they're all fixed at once.
Mm-hmm.
The body will redirect that energy to the most important functions first.
Okay.
You and I were talking the other day, and I told you a lot of times people start to get more energy and then they go right back into the gym.
Mm-hmm.
they burn themselves out. Well, really what you want to do is, just kind of sit on that energy for a while and let it get directed towards the areas. Dr. Kendall Stewart calls them buckets, mitochondrial buckets. So the nervous system and the heart and the liver would be the first to start to heal. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Let's look at the questions too also. Now, Kathy is asking, we just talked a little bit about what to do to improve our mitochondria. SOD is superoxide dismutase is what that stands for. She's asking about specific products and dosages. Obviously, he can't tell you what dosages to take, but you do have your store up, right, on your website, so they can go there and kind of see what you recommend?
There's a store there, but that's not, it's getting redone by the web guy. There's a number of different products. Most of the products that people talk about the mitochondria are things like CoQ10 and carnitine, and those are certainly beneficial. The two rate limiting nutrients for mitochondrial functioning, meaning the two nutrients that will hold off everything else, are CoQ10 and oxygen. So I actually sleep with an oxygen concentrator in my nose at night, just to improve mitochondrial health. People with sleep apnea will certainly have mitochondrial dysfunction. But as far as, carnitine, CoQ10, those things help. But again, you have to look at the other avenues such as antioxidant protection, rebuilding the mitochondrial membranes. So those are three avenues. And, just like when we talked about your, hopefully you don't mind me saying this, your inflammation,
right?
Instead of just giving you massive doses of one supplement to go down one avenue, it's much better approached through multiple means at moderate doses.
Right. So let's talk about that real quick since you brought me up. So I take all of the, I'm doing all of the, we've talked about this before. I'm doing the high doses of Enhanza, turmeric, curcumin, or whatever. I'm doing all of the CBD oil, that gosh awful Takasumi Supreme, which turns my fingernails and my glasses black. All of the things that we're doing, we're kind of going at it with little pieces, right? High omega-3s and so on. How come when I asked you about the glutathione, I remember you told me the answer, but I want you to say the answer out loud so they can learn from it. When I said, I've been taking liposomal glutathione, and I said, should I continue with that? And you said, if you don't have any problems with it. Is it because it detoxes me too quickly, or why is it? Because it's top grade liposomal glutathione.
Yeah, so, well, a couple of reasons. One, it may detox you too quickly. Two, sometimes if you have issues with sulfur-based nutrients, it can cause a reaction. Three, and just take my word for it, there's a reaction called the Fenton reaction. It has to do with iron, but also glutathione. And if you have a lot of oxidative stress, it may just create more oxidative stress. And
you would feel worse, or?
Yeah, you'd typically feel worse.
Okay.
And it would, not help with detoxification like you're expecting it to.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that not everyone should just go out and get glutathione and start taking it without knowing what else is going on with their system?
Right. So, if we had 100 people and we all give them the same dose of glutathione, the first time I got a glutathione push, I kind of sat in the chair and stared at the wall for about 45 minutes because I was so, depleted in it. Now I nebulize it every day. I do a lot of crazy things, but
yes, this is true.
So, if you have access to it, why not?
Right.
The glutathione, it could make you worse. It could detox you too quickly. Certainly if you're not having a bowel movement every day, you certainly don't need to go taking a bunch of glutathione. Right.
Okay. So stop for a second. And the reason that is because that's one of your main detox pathways is elimination through bowel movements, you guys. So that and sweating and kidneys and all of those things. So if you are, if you're not sweating, if you're not using the bathroom regularly or whatever, you can take all of these detox things you want and they're all just going to sit in your system like a big garbage dump, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other issue is that, and there's not a lot of tests available to check this. There's one out of Europe, but there's reduced glutathione, which is the form you want it in. That's the form where it has the electrons to donate for detox and mitochondrial protection. And then there's oxidized glutathione. Ideally, you should be able to recycle oxidized glutathione to reduce glutathione. Sometimes people will have trouble with that. So their total glutathione level might be okay, but they may have too much or too many oxidized glutathione molecules.
Okay. So, for people who don't know what glutathione is, or, they haven't even, like, when I think I have to say this, I think the words detox, cleanse, antioxidant, all of those words, they get tossed around in the wellness world and no one really talks about, they don't really know what they mean, right? So you can say cleanse, you can say detox, but when we say antioxidants, we think, goji berries or whatever those things are. And in my mind, in the last few years of studying all of this stuff, I always see in my head, like antioxidants, like sweepers that go through the body and sweep out the goo and the junk, and the free radicals is the garbage, you guys. It's like, we're talking about, like, vitamin C is an antioxidant, right? But it doesn't do what glutathione does, correct?
Correct. Glutathione, we talk about it as an antioxidant, and it's certainly important as that, but it's also very important for detoxification, for immune function, for gut health, and for mitochondrial health. And so, it's not just an antioxidant that helps block these free radicals. It works on a lot of systems, and the lower your glutathione levels, the higher your risk of every disease out there.
Yeah. Yeah, mine were not bottomed out, but they were pretty low about a year and a half or 2 years ago or something like that. And that's when I started doing all the DNA testing with the methylation and the supplements and all that jazz. So let's go over here to another question. So Leah is asking, can shingles damage mitochondria years later since it stays in your system? What about veterans exposed to biochemicals? What would be good for detox? So start with the shingles answer.
Yeah, so any pathogen can damage. We call it a microbial mitochondriopathy. So just meaning that a microbe or a bug or pathogen damages the mitochondria. The way it does that is it turns on these inflammatory genes, the cytokines, that you need some of them to control the microbe, but usually the inflammation cascade gets out of control. And so the pathogens can certainly damage the mitochondria. And, you get, a lot of people have, reactivation of viruses, and they, don't really know it. They think of viruses more as like an acute thing. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. But long term, they can easily become reactivated, during periods of stress, low glutathione, mitochondrial dysfunction, immune suppression from different heavy metals like mercury, or environmental chemicals like glyphosate. And so the answer to the shingles question is yes, but you can really substitute any microbe or pathogen or infection there, and the answer will be yes. Okay.
So what about veterans exposed to biochemicals?
Yeah, they, and actually that brings me to a good point. If you look up a guy named Garth Nicholson, his daughter served in the Gulf War, and she came back very sick. And he happened to be, like a molecular biologist. And what it turned out to be, and he proved it, he lost his job over it, but he proved that the government was vaccinating our soldiers with man-altered mycoplasma. Mycoplasma is a stealth bacteria. It's like a bacteria on steroids. And, the soldiers had no idea they were receiving this. And it's very hard to kill because it doesn't have a cell wall. And, when we take antibiotics to kill bacteria, that's the way most of them work, is they destroy the cell wall. Well, if you don't have a cell wall, then how are you going to kill it? So, it can make you very sick. But, along with those vaccines, exposure to chemicals, certainly, whether it's through, the weapons they're dealing with or explosions, whatever, can certainly damage the mitochondria for sure. And that's where, they did a study on the rescue workers from September 11th. And I think the average rescue worker was on 17 to 18 medications.
Oh my gosh.
And what they did is they had them do a far infrared sauna. I think it was 45 minutes twice a day for 6 months. And after that 6 month period, most of them were down to 3 or 4. And so, some chemicals can come out through the sweat, through, sauna. Others, you have to be excreted through the bowels or through the kidneys. They can be bound up with things like toxemia supreme or pectosol. But certainly, yeah, any sort of environmental chemical, especially glyphosate, can damage the mitochondria.
Okay. And she's saying what would be good for detox, which you pretty much just covered, saunas and all of that, those kinds of things. Yeah. So let's move down to Stan, because Stan was saying, as a veteran, he wanted to know the same thing. He's mailing his organics, acid, adrenal, saliva, and blood tests for some sort of a team consult, which is interesting to me that at the VA, Stan, I want you to type in the messages. How would they be able to interpret that? It'd be interesting to see if a VA hospital is able to even interpret those types of tests. But let's move on to Andre real quick. She's saying, what kind of a fast is recommended? Are you talking about intermittent fasting?
Well, so yeah, I mean, technically, we fast every night from the time we go to bed till the time we wake up and eat. It just depends on the state of your adrenals and thyroid. And how constitutionally strong you are. So, it could be a 1-day fast. It could just be intermittent fasting. It's going to have to be customized to the individual. But you definitely, don't, if you have severe adrenal issues, don't want to do any sort of fasting.
Yeah. And, I think it's interesting that everybody has a different definition of how, what intermittent fasting is. Some people say 10 hours, some people say 14, some people say you go an entire day where you don't eat. I think it's really individual. Like you're saying, if your adrenals are in poor health, you shouldn't fast, right?
Right.
Because it's stressful, low blood sugar is stressful on the adrenal glands. But, I've noticed it in times when I'm not in stress, I can go up to almost, probably 16, 17 hours and not even really think about food. Like it doesn't even cross my radar. And I think sometimes we tend to eat because we tell ourselves it's time to, or we eat because that's what you're supposed to do. So I think we're kind of cluing away from that instinct and intuition that says, I'm not hungry. And that's that's our way of paying attention to the fact that maybe we're not supposed to eat right now. Maybe our breakfast is at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I think it's individual for everybody as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Connie's asking, what do you do to help the mitochondria for a person that has diabetes? Anything different?
No, it's all the stuff that we talked about already, but, also balancing blood sugar, improving insulin sensitivity. So, insulin sensitivity, that's a whole nother, ball of wax, but, chromium, magnesium, B1, those are the basics to help improve blood sugar. Making sure you always eat protein with your carbs so you don't get a huge insulin spike. All of those things, combined with the other methods of optimizing the mitochondria are what you would do. You really go about it the same way.
Yeah. Okay. So we have, can you please tell us let's see here, wait a minute. Where do we get the nose oxygen thingy? And can you please tell us, next question was exactly the same. Which oxygen concentrator do you sleep with at night, Tim?
I forget the name of the company, the one that I use. I think I paid $800 for it or something.
Woo! Yeah.
That's cheap. There's some up to $2,000, $2,500.
Yeah.
But you just, buy the oxygen concentrator and, it'll come with extension hoses and you order the nasal cannula and, you go to either 2 liters per minute or 3 liters per minute. That's what I do. Sometimes, depending on where you buy it, you might have to have a prescription for it. But Invogen, if I remember correctly, I think it's INVOGEN. I think that's one. But there's many. You can search on Amazon, read the reviews, and kind of go by that.
Okay. What about the glutathione nebulizer?
Well, glutathione, it's going to come in a prescription vial, so it has to come from a compounding pharmacy, and it's going to be in a vial. It needs to be refrigerated, and you draw it up and squirt it into the nebulizer. Nebulizer nowadays, as far as I know, all of them are prescription. So you have to get a script for one. You can get it at CVS or Walgreens or Target, wherever. Walmart, and you squirt it into a tube, and then you have a mouthpiece in, and it's just connected to the little pump that you turn on, and it takes about 2 to 3 minutes to nebulize it.
Okay, so talk about nebulizing, because I mean, when we say that we can do it liposomally, why do you do it? Why do you do a nebulizer?
Well, so it's just like squirting something up your nose or breathing it in. You're bypassing the gut.
Okay.
You can certainly do transdermal as well.
Topical, arms,
yeah, topical,
legs, yeah.
You can do that. Oral liposomal. I mean, some people notice great benefit from that, but some people don't.
Oh, it smells and tastes so bad. It's so bad.
She's exaggerating. It really does.
No, it's so bad, y'all. So bad. Listen, I started taking this stuff like almost 3 years ago, the liposomal stuff. And I thought, well, I can do this. I'm in good condition right now. I put a whole tablespoon in just in a glass of water. Ruined it for me forever. I still do it, but I now have to put like a teaspoon in some orange juice and like really throw it back and hold my nose. I have PTSD from glutathione. Ugh. It's horrible. So Tim is frozen, I think. Tim, I think you're frozen. Can you hear me okay? Oh, goodness. Here we go. Hopefully it'll pick back up. Let's give him a minute to reconnect. I'm reading your guys' comments over here. Let's see here. Sorry to hear about your father, Leah. That's awful, awful. So testing for glutathione, if I'm on track. Tim's probably going to hop back in here in just a second, you guys, and re-sign in. Let me send him a quick message and just tell him to re-sign in. Hold on a minute, guys. Sign. So you can test and I'll ask Tim when he pops back on if this is the best way to test, but I got my glutathione tested by blood. So you could do a simple blood serum test, ask for it through like your general practitioner. Let's see here. Yeah, Stan's talking about bodybuilders taking tons of steroids and HGH and oral steroids, glutathione injections, etc. I know it's crazy. I know a lot of, hey, Tim.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're good. I was just talking about the blood test for glutathione. Is that how you prefer to test for glutathione, or do you have another method?
Yeah, I mean, there is a test that you can do, but like I was saying, well, number one, I mean, some of the organic acids tests will give you markers or indicators of your glutathione levels. But if you want to look at the oxidized to reduced ratio of glutathione, you need to do one of those tests out of Europe, and I forget the name of the lab. I think it's Health Diagnostics Research Institute. But that'll tell you the oxidized to reduced ratio. But you can look at an organic acids test and a few other tests that will tell you your glutathione status or give you indirect markers of your glutathione.
Okay, tell me about the oats test, because many people have done it. I've done it, but what do you see on there that tells you that you have reduced glutathione? Is it just the high oxidative stress markers?
Well, that I mean, if you have high oxidative stress, it means you probably need more glutathione. But the pyroglutamate or pyroglutamic acid, that's one marker.
Would be low?
No, if pyroglutamic acid is high,
okay,
then it's the opposite of what you think. Then you're low in glutathione.
Got it.
The N-acetylcysteine levels, that can be important because that's the precursor to glutathione.
Yep.
So those two things or three things really you can look at and go by those for your level. Okay,
so you just said an N-acetylcysteine. So for those of you who have seen the acronym, it's NAC, N-A-C. When we say that's the precursor to glutathione, we mean that turns into glutathione in the body. Is that right?
Yeah, so it gets turned into glutathione.
So why wouldn't you start with that? Why would some people want to go directly into glutathione? Or is there a better time to start with the NAC and then see if your body can then turn it into glutathione? Or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, some people will say if you give too much glutathione, it can shut down your body's own, production or whatever. Bottom line is most of us are deficient in glutathione. I'd say all of us, pretty much are deficient to some degree. So, if you can get the real thing in its usable form, why not?
Right.
Some people will, use N-acetylcysteine instead. But to make a long story short, if your cystine to cysteine ratio is high, you really shouldn't use N-acetylcysteine.
What is it called? If you're cystine, cystine?
Yeah, if that's high compared to your cysteine, you don't really want to use N-acetylcysteine.
Got it. Okay. All right. So let me see here. Let me go back for just a second. Everybody's asking about spelling. Spell out this, spell out that. Ask him to spell out complex medical stuff. Hold on a moment. I want to just go back and make sure I didn't miss something because it just scrolled down like crazy. Okay, so I spelled mycoplasma, M-Y-C-O plasma, mycoplasma, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was vaccinated and took that pill for anthrax twice. That was Stan. Oil fires, explosive rounds, radiated rounds. Oh my goodness. So they will look at it, Stan, the War Related Center will look at it, but will they know what to do with it is my question.
Well, I'm just shocked that VA that they even know what an organic acids test is.
Well, he probably ordered them from somewhere else and is bringing them in there. They probably don't have the ability to order them. But so it says here that at the IHS conference, it was suggested by a doctor who studied ketogenic to fast 18 hours maximum if you're doing keto, intermittent fasting, and eating. Yeah, that probably makes sense. I mean, if you eat your last meal at 7 o'clock, golly, 1 o'clock, that would be a good chunk of time. You just skip breakfast and have lunch, I guess.
Yeah, and again, I mean, a lot of the research is done on ketogenic diets and neurological issues, but they're not factoring in, adrenal stress, suboptimal low thyroid function.
Right.
So, just looking at a ketogenic diet on paper, okay, it looks great. But, if you have a bunch of viruses and a bunch of environmental toxins and you have gut dysbiosis and, you're not sleeping at night, the last thing you want to do is a ketogenic diet.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right. So let's look here. Stan's saying, what are some possible remedies? We're going to move into this migraine thing a little bit because you were talking about the brain being one of the first things affected, right? With the mitochondria. Mm-hmm. I wonder if this has anything to do with it, but he's saying, what are some possible remedies for migraines besides improved purified water intake, magnesium, a cup of real coffee, removing gluten and dairy, mainstream elimination, and possibly removing all chemicals and toxins? Like of course we need to find out what it's coming from, but what else do you have in your pocket about migraines? And are they affected? Does that have something to do with mitochondria?
Yeah, it can. You can have what's called a neurotropic virus, a virus that likes to get into the nervous system, the brain, and it likes to get into the myelin around our peripheral nerves. And so that can activate certain white blood cells in the brain that are not meant to be activated long term. So certainly, those can contribute. Upper cervical dysfunction can contribute. Your C1, C2. Mm-hmm. 50% of your head rotation comes from C1, C2. So if that's out of alignment, that can affect things. If your jaw alignment is off, if you're not fully occluded, and your teeth don't touch all the way around, that can affect things. Grinding your teeth at night can certainly lead to headaches, typically not migraines, but more just nagging headaches. But all those things, can contribute. And, if it's a neurotropic virus, it may or may not show up in blood. But going after viruses, like you said, optimizing magnesium, detoxing, all those things can help migraines.
Okay. And so he's asking about, they live in an apartment. What about mold? Mold can cause migraines, can it?
Mold can cause anything, really.
I know. I hate mold.
And so mycotoxins, they actually get into the mitochondria. And that's one of the ways that they damage the body. The first place they go when they get into the cell is they go to the mitochondria. And that's why you get neurological dysfunction from mold. If you look at the MRIs of people with MS and people with mold toxicity, they're almost identical.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so mold, actually, there's a guy named Dr. Gray out in New Mexico, and I don't know if he did it, but he was wanting to do a study of households with domestic violence and the concentration of mold in that house. Because if you don't have blood flow to the frontal lobe, you can't make rational decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people that are, running from the cops, getting arrested, doing drugs,
having affairs on their wives,
having affairs on their wives, they're having a lot of mold toxicity. And, it affects, brain function severely.
And that's your spontaneous. That's the place that you don't have control over, your impulse controls, like you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you recommend 100% organic hemp CBD oil spray for mitochondrial dysfunction, or?
I haven't personally used the sprays. They're constantly tinkering with the technology, making it liposomal, this or that. But when you do that, usually you have to put in some additives that you may or may not react to. The bottom line is, the CBD, getting the level up high enough. Some companies make capsules. So for people like cancer patients that need really high doses, typically we'll use the capsules. So, that's an option. And then the CBD, there are some, drops like you and I use from Two Eyes Naturals.
Yep.
But, typically if you need the really high doses, capsules are more economical.
Yeah, didn't you tell me they were talking about making the capsules? Because that oil, I mean, it's $75 a bottle, and it doesn't last me hardly any time.
Yeah, so they're doing the beta testing for it now. I don't know how long before they'll release it to the public. I have some already, but hopefully they'll be releasing it to the public soon. There are other companies, tons of companies are coming out with, different hemp products, CBD products. And, it's kind of hard to evaluate, all of them. The one I use, I just know the girl that worked with the scientists and developed it. And I know, she spent, her whole days researching it and going to labs and traveling to this researcher's office, and so I really trust her.
And it doesn't taste bad. I'll say that's the one thing you sent my way where I'm like, I was tentative when I put it in. I'm like,
Takasimi Supreme is tasteless.
No, but it's such a pain. It turns my fingers black, then my cups are black, and then it spilled on my granite top, which has black in it. So then I couldn't see if I cleaned it. And then I knocked over one of the cups one time. I'm like,
You're like my orthopedic patients that have knee pain but won't stop wearing high heels. Oh,
stop it. Anyway, I like that oil. I don't think it takes, I use a bottle in, a very short period of time. So I just kind of buy them in, 2, 3, 4 bottles at a time. So, but it's got that orange flavor. So it's good.
Yeah, it's curcumin and coconut oil.
Yeah, it's good. It tastes good. So let's move on to another question here. Does it make sense to go to an ND and get a monthly vitamin and glutathione drip? I doubt I could afford it since insurance won't cover it, but would it make sense to do that if someone wanted to move ahead with their health?
You can, but I was telling a colleague yesterday, what I see, and I made this mistake myself in the past, we get all pumped up and fired up, and we go to this clinic and get a week of IVs or 3 weeks of IVs, but really long-term, it's what you do day in and day out.
Right.
So, I might not eat any dessert today or tomorrow, but if I eat 5 desserts the next day, have I really benefited myself? Yeah. So, I would say the things that you can do that are more consistent are going to have that additive long-term effect. Certainly if you can do those and then get a little booster, that certainly helps. Glutathione pushes by themselves aren't that expensive. So, you could always do that. But the prescription, like the nebulizing glutathione, that can help, as well.
I think the liposomal is not that expensive. I don't think I spend $50 on a bottle of that, maybe 45 something.
Yeah, it's
not a big bottle, but
right. It's not that expensive, so you can use that. And then I know this is another topic, but your methylation pathway going, because that's how you make glutathione. And pardon me, if you're not making your own glutathione, you want to get your body making it and then add some additional. And there's certain genetic polymorphisms where you might have a little glitch in your biochemistry and you might not make as much glutathione as you should. And so that's where the epigenetics kind of comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at patterns. Those are the kind of things that can be helpful.
Okay, so you'll be looking at my DNA test and letting me know if I have that glitch. So could NAC help with cirrhosis of the liver?
Yeah, definitely. Your liver can be destroyed up to 75% and regenerate. NAC, actually, it's a prescription called Mucomist, and they use it for lung injuries. So nebulized or inhaled N-acetylcysteine helps with lung injuries, but helps with liver injuries as well. Probably even more so than that is alpha lipoic acid can really
Okay.
help.
ALA. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Stan is saying mycotoxins. I live in a basement apartment. Oh my goodness. Okay, so there you are, right? That's another big piece right there, Stan. I want to just defer back to the mold webinar that we did, since we got about 15 minutes left here. I want to make sure that, Stan, I know you joined the mentorship group recently, but if you didn't get a chance to listen to the mold webinar, we've got some good information in there about how you can handle dealing with the mold. Living in a basement, you're almost guaranteed to have it, right? I mean,
Right.
mold's everywhere. It can be up here in the third story of my house. Not just because I'm not in a basement doesn't mean it's not here, but you're more likely to be, exposed to it in a basement, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you live in, like the Southeast, like we do, where there's high humidity.
Mm-hmm.
You have to control the humidity. Most people, I recommend that they have dehumidifiers installed underneath the house, as well as have one running inside the house. And then I have an Air Oasis unit right next to mine, which it filters not just mycotoxins, but also organic compounds and things like that.
Yeah.
It's very quiet. It's pretty inexpensive. And you can get them to cover different amounts of square footage in your house. So doing that, you can certainly filter the mold. You can do things to kill the mold, but ultimately you really want to control the humidity, because mold can't form without a humid environment.
Right. Okay. All right, so let's see here. What are the pros and cons of taking vitamins orally versus injectables? Injectables are not expensive, but they're painful. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, they can get expensive depending on which ones you take and the dosage.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, if you're doing them intramuscularly, it depends on how often you're doing them. If you're doing them every day, you're going to run out of spots to inject, and you're going to get sore.
Yeah.
Like guys that inject testosterone, they just do it twice a week. But you can do it subcutaneously, just right under the skin, and it's virtually impossible to hurt yourself. But obviously you're bypassing the gut and the liver, assuming you're getting adequate blood flow to that region. Your body's going to pick up the nutrients and everything. Then there's liposomal that you can use or take on an empty stomach. But anytime you can take something as an injectable, it's going to be better absorbed than something orally.
Right. So let's talk about liposomal vitamin C real quick. So because we were talking about liposomal glutathione, liposomal vitamin C, then you've got buffered vitamin C, then you've got people who say, you should take vitamin C to diarrheal tolerance or whatever. I've always just stuck with, like, when I was in one of my most crazy adrenal fatigue states many years ago, when I was exercising like a fool, I learned how to, come out of that. And one of the things that I learned was, super high doses of vitamin C. So I ordered the buffered vitamin C, and I literally was doing 10 to 15,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. And that and drinking sea salt. I was drinking sea salt and salt water. I was napping. I was doing meditation. Like I literally, when I figured out what was going on, I like all guns loaded, put my life on hold, and came out of that in a couple of months. What are your thoughts about the vitamin C, and what's the most effective vitamin C?
Vitamin C, it is beneficial for the adrenal glands, but it can also lower cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
So, if your cortisol is really low, at a certain point, you do not want to take it at that point, or if it's really low all throughout the day, it'd probably be better to take some form of adaptogen.
Okay.
The liposomal forms, are good. You can do injectable vitamin C. The ascorbic acid you tend to want to avoid. As a general rule, you don't want to go over 10 grams orally, or you take it to what's called two bowel tolerance, because it can upset your GI tract. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good for the adrenals, good for the immune system. It's good for detoxification, etc. So, yeah, I think the oral liposomal is good. You just want to make sure you're not lowering your cortisol too much.
Okay. So Stan is saying my vitamin C was 0.00 in a lab. Can you pee it? You can pee it out, right? Adaptogen would be Norabsor. Okay. So I don't think you can totally pee out all your vitamin C. I think you can be deficient in it and show that on a lab, but I don't think you can have vitamin C and then you urinate all day and then it's gone, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a water-soluble vitamin, so, I mean, it's going to come out in the urine. But if you're under any sort of stressor, your body's going to take it and use it for whatever purpose it needs. So, the recommended daily allowance is, that's kind of assuming you live in a bubble, you don't have any stress, that you have this perfect life. And so your requirements for vitamin C, for magnesium, for zinc, they all go up when you're under any type of stressor.
Sure. Okay, so he's saying that Stan says adrenal fatigue is his diagnosis. And this is where me, the investigative health coach, pops in, and I step outside of the general thought process of coaching, and I say it's not really your diagnosis. Adrenal fatigue is a symptom of something else that's happening in your body. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you can call it adrenal fatigue. I still test the adrenals to see, if we need to support them,
right,
or if at a particular time of the day we need to support them. But technically, the adrenals don't just get tired for no reason. That's like saying my bicep. I woke up with biceps fatigue. Anything that activates, like if you do the Dutch test, they have a really good diagram. I think it's on the 3rd page, and it shows, stress and how it activates the whole HPA, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis.
Which is what Michelle just typed. Yep.
Yeah. So anything that activates that axis will stress the adrenals, and that can be a virus, bad bacteria in the gut, blood sugar fluctuations, environmental toxicity, mercury especially.
Emotional stress, mental stress, physical stress. Yeah.
Yeah. And it adds up. So it's cumulative. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I'm stressed out today, I'm going to go do a huge workout. And that's actually the day you should do the lightest workout.
Right.
Because you have more stressors on board. And, anything that causes inflammation in the body will activate that adrenal axis.
Right.
And so, an important point for females is that your cortisol may be normal, but if your progesterone's low, especially if you're young, not old like Carmen, no, I'm just kidding. But
old lady.
If your progesterone is low and your cortisol is normal, it may be sacrificing your progesterone to make cortisol.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to pull from somewhere. It's going to find what it needs from somewhere. And it's all so interconnected. Kathy is saying about the adaptogens, ashwagandha, rhodiola, and so on. Now, I take rhodiola because you told me to. I'm like your puppet. Here, lift your right arm. Here, swallow that. Take this. But what else do you suggest? Do you like rhodiola? Obviously, you like rhodiola. You recommended it for me, but is that one of your favorites? I know ashwagandha can affect the thyroid too, right?
Yeah. So rhodiola, I tend to think of more as a true, like if cortisol is low, it'll raise it. If it's high, it'll lower it. Ashwagandha, it may not do this all the time. I tend to think of it just kind of lowering cortisol.
Okay.
It does help T4 and T3 get into your cells more.
Okay.
So if you're taking thyroid, you got to be careful. You may get thrown into a hyperthyroid state. But usually a blend of adaptogens can be helpful, for different reasons. And so, you may need something like vitamin C at one point during the day if your cortisol is too high. You may need rhodiola at another point if your cortisol is too low. Right.
Of course, you get that, through saliva. You can do a Dutch test or urine test. You can do a saliva test or whatnot. So which one do you prefer for adrenal health? Do you prefer the Dutch test or do you prefer the saliva test?
Well, So saliva testing is accurate for cortisol and DHEA,
right?
but not for sex hormones.
Right.
If you just want to look at cortisol and DHEA, you can do an adrenal stress profile, but you'll get that as part of the Dutch test,
right?
If you do it. So, if you're looking to do sex hormones and adrenal testing, then you can just do the Dutch test.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got them all done. You've seen my folder. It's a mile thick. All right. Kathy is saying that rhodiola is very drying. I'm not sure what that means. I'll let her text and put that in there. What are your top labs? What are the top labs if someone's got so much stuff going on? What would you recommend? Give me your top 3 and then your top 5, then add the last 2. But if someone says I'm limited in my budget, I need some testing done, what are your top 3 for answers to figure it out?
I would say number 1, a stool test, a PCR DNA based stool test, an adrenal stress index, and a comprehensive thyroid panel.
Okay. And then let's say someone says, okay, I got an extra $500. Then what? Then
we would do some pathogen testing, viral testing, bacterial testing, etc.
Is that blood testing?
Blood, yeah. Okay. And then if they can afford it, mycotoxin testing.
Okay. So when does oats play a role for you?
Well, it kind of depends on the person and what they've already had done, if they've had anything done already. Okay. It's different oats measure different things. Like Great Plains is a little bit different than Metametrics, but it will measure some mitochondrial markers, some oxidative stress markers. Sometimes you might not show up as having any pathogens on your stool test, but you may have some pathogen metabolites on an oats test. So it may be something that the stool test just doesn't pick up. So that can be helpful.
Yeah.
But if you can really only afford to do, 1 or 2 tests, the oats might be one of them. Just because you can say, all right, I'm low in glutathione, I'm low in vitamin C, and at least we can build those levels up. We won't necessarily know what's causing it behind the scenes, but we can, build the stores of that nutrient up.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, we've been keeping in mind that if we have some insurance, many of these things are covered by insurance, at least, partially. Like I got every single test done, when I did all the mold testing and I did the entire thing. Like it took 15 vials of blood from me for one day. I was like, are you ever going to stop pulling blood out of my arm? And I'm afraid of needles. Like I don't like needles. I'm better now. Thank you. I'm like don't go into the elderly thing and about the knees and all that stuff. I'm better now. But back then I was like, what are we testing? 15 vials of blood is a lot of blood to give at one time. And I got I think it was 20 pages of labs back. And I think I paid $35. I mean, it was really, really good at the time. You know what I mean? So I really encourage people to try to do blood whenever they can first, right?
Yeah, it depends on your insurance. If you go and have a full thyroid panel done at LabCorp and you haven't met your deductible, your bill might be $700 to $900.
Oh my God.
The lab that I use for full thyroid panel, they offer a reduced cash price of $170. So a lot of my
can anyone use that lab or?
You have to have a provider order it, but yeah. I mean, I don't mark it up. I just let the lab charge them, so I don't get in the middle of it. But yeah, a lot of my patients, even with good insurance, will choose to not use the insurance and just go with the reduced cash price.
Wow, I didn't know. I mean, I've never paid that much for a lab before. So for all the years that I've been dealing with Hashimoto's and thyroid and stuff, I've never seen a price tag like that. But knock on wood, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to check in and make sure there are no further questions, you guys. We're getting down to the wire on time here. We've got Joan asking, you can get a full, she's saying you can get a full thyroid from SpectraCell Labs for $40. I would have to see that, all of that. Is that, Joan, tell us if that's reverse T3, all the antibodies, all of that. That would be really inexpensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you can order it yourself, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Hannah is saying stool tests are very pricey. They are pricey and disgusting, Kathy says. They are pretty gross. My mom and dad obviously went through and did stool testing through Tim. I used Tim for my health. My mom and dad used him for their health. And of course, my dad had to send me a joke the day that he was doing his labs. He was like, your mom and I sent our poop off to Dr. Tim, He's like, you didn't want a sample of that, did you? I'm like, oh, God, Dad, really? It's disgusting. But the answers are so phenomenal, what you get from those labs, right?
Yeah. I mean,
totally.
you know, it can actually save you money in the long run. You might be taking, say, digestive enzymes, and you may not need them.
Or taking the wrong probiotic, like I was.
Or taking the wrong probiotic. Or, you know, you might need a specific set of nutrients to kill a certain pathogen that you wouldn't have known about.
Right. Yeah. Super powerful. So, all right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to wrap up, and I'm just going to say thank you again. Obviously, your brain is just, I don't know how it fits in that little head of yours, but we appreciate you being with us so much. And I know that I'm going to talk to you soon. And let me just make sure. Hold on, Carmen, got to save the chat. Oh, yeah. You know what, you guys, what I'll do is I'll put this chat out and I will save it into a document, and I'll put it into the mentorship and mastery files for you guys, so you can get some of the names and all of that kind of stuff. And then it says here, let me see, does someone that has had gastro bypass need testing? More than likely, right? I mean, if someone's had gastrointestinal bypass, I mean, they've had bypass surgery. I know so many people, I've had clients with it, they all have problems.
Yeah.
They all have problems. I mean, they're shutting down the, you know, absorption of nutrients. I mean, that's a whole other day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. All right. Thank you so much again, Tim. And thank you, everybody. Welcome. And have a great, what is it, Thursday? Have a great rest of the day and a great weekend. And we'll talk to you later. Thanks, Tim.
All right. You're welcome. Bye.